Welcome back to day 11 of the Morbid Moonlight 31 Days of Halloween that this year sees me watch my way through the films of iconic horror legend Felissa Rose, and today we're going to be taking a look at 2016's haunted house slasher mashup Family Possessions, written and directed by Tommy Faircloth. I gotta say that straight away the signs aren't great for this one. It starts with a caption promising that this film is inspired by true events, which carries about as much weight as not saying that your film is based on true events, but is more insulting to the intelligence of your audience. But the first good sign is that Felissa Rose is third in the cast. That means that hopefully she's not just going to have a little cameo but a proper part. Also in the cast, the other real name for horror fans is of course Mr. Mark Patton. Now Mark Patton is one of those actors who kind of did what Felissa Rose could have done in that he did one horror film in the 80s, which was A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 Freddy's Revenge, before basically giving up on acting altogether by 1986. Weirdly, Family Possessions is actually Mark Patton's first horror film since Freddy's Revenge, and it seems like quite a strange return to the genre for somebody with his reputation. Of course, fans of Freddy's Revenge will know about Mark Patton thanks to the Scream Queen documentary about the guy's life and his sexuality, but it's interesting to see I do like Mark Patton here doing horror again, just because he's always seemed like somebody who just starred in this one horror film and then vanished. Apart from that though, one of the things that I think strikes you most about Family Possessions is the fact that it's just under 2 fucking hours long, which needless to say, for a basic haunted house type film like this, is way too long, and unfortunately, it seems to be a film that never takes a minute to tell you anything that it couldn't stretch out to 5 minutes. And what you get is a film that creeps along at this very slow pace indeed. It's light on incidents and pretty painfully slow in getting its plot points across. It's also a film that, because it kind of holds off from giving you anything too shocking for at least the first half, is fucking littered with false frights. Now I know some people think false frights are a legit way of breaking suspense, but I counted, no word of a lie, 10 fucking false frights in this film. When things suddenly burst into frame with this loud bang, then it turns out to be something totally normal and explainable. There's even the classic double false fright of a jump scare. Oh, it's all a dream jump scare. Oh, that was just a dream too, which is fucking just a no-no. These kind of scenes are what you put into a film to try and stop your audience from falling asleep, to remind them that they're watching a horror film even though you don't have any legit scares to put in. And they're just really cheap, because after about 2 or 3 of them you start to get annoyed, and by the 10th time you're fucking raging, so that's not great. But you know what's weird? All things considered, I actually didn't mind Family Possessions that much at all, even though it's obviously pretty limited. The acting has got quite a nice kind of earnest quality to it that feels a little bit TV movie-ish in places. Not that that's really a bad thing. The characters are simple but pretty likeable. Our lead character Rachel, played by Leah Wiseman, is pretty decent, although I've got to say that I think that her friend Maggie, played by Erica Edwards, is a lot more vivid and likeable with more going on in her character, and by far she is the better actress of the two. In actual fact, I found myself wishing that the film was more about Maggie than it was about Rachel. I guess just because I identify more with Maggie, who's got more personal problems and more emotional depth than Rachel, whose dad sympathises with her about how difficult it must be for her belonging to a family with only one car. Meanwhile, Maggie is off dealing with her alcoholic mother. And that mother is played, of course, by none other than Felissa Rose. Now, I think she gives a good performance here, even though it's very much a hugely cliched part. But I'd have liked more of a focus on those two characters than in the central family who are actually following in Family Possessions, who all seem just a little bit sparkly and light. I'm not talking really heavy angsty soap opera, but I think that an actress like Felissa Rose could have brought more to the part than just your basic drunken, shrieking harridan. It's a fun turn if you like kind of obvious one-note archetypes, but I think that Felissa could have done better for herself really. I reckon this gets a Felissa factor of about 3 out of 10 in that she's not on screen much, not that vital to the film overall, but reasonably important in the few scenes that she's got. It sort of makes me wonder what the appeal for her was in taking this part, but I suppose it's a chance to try out a different kind of role. She also gets to use that phrase that I have not heard in a very long time, one which sends shivers down the spine of anybody that knows what it means.
You know, I heard she had a blue waffle. You should Google it.
Unfortunately, she never gets a chance to share any screen time with Mark Patton. But speaking of Mark Patton, I know he's somebody that's very openly gay, and in a lot of ways has resigned himself to his fate as the poster boy of the gay Nightmare on Elm Street film, but he plays such an incredibly arch, hyper-bitchy gay stereotype here, pretty much just for out-and-out comedy. Again, it's a part that's not really got any nuance, but just a chance to be outrageous and have fun, which I guess is fine. There's a few other kind of minor quibbles that I've got, such as the fact that when anyone screams, the sound kind of blows out. A lot of the dialogue that goes from naturalistic and quirky ends up sounding really forced, and without spoiling anything, it's a film that ends with one of the most cynical bits of sequel baiting that I've ever heard. The final confrontation scene at the end involves the antagonist basically explaining what's going on for about 10 minutes, which grinds a slow film to an absolute standstill. There's some incredibly perfunctory, gratuitous nudity, and a really spectacularly unconvincing prop corpse. Sadly, it's the kind of film that, to look at in any real detail, you're only going to find that it comes up short, but there's a certain kind of simple, Nancy Drew-ish kind of charm to it that's hard to hate, and I think the cast are all pretty likeable. Weirdly, even though it's got that kind of TV movie teen drama kind of vibe to it, it's also got some pretty full-on violence in places, including I suppose what you could say is a bit of a variant on the Poltergeist bathroom scene that involves a confusion between a toothbrush and a razor that is fucking disgusting. The stuff about teeth always kind of gets under my skin for some reason, and this one is just dreadful. You know, it feels like punching down slagging off a film like this because it feels earnest, and it's sort of trying hard to make something that's just a straightforward piece of horror light entertainment. And to me it feels a lot less cynical and mechanical than a lot of bigger budgeted Blumhouse stuff. It's all just shrieky jump scares and random stuff being thrust at you from out the dark for no reason. It is pretty nuts and bolts, but it chunders along slowly and steadily, and it's definitely not a film that I've got any huge problems with. It's just not the paciest of films. But it is pretty watchable if you want something pretty relaxed that's going to keep you going. I think that even though I'd probably say that it's about average, I'm going to slide in at a 4 out of 10 for Family Possessions, because even though I like most of the people in it, I think the horror is a little bit lackluster. I think you could have got more mileage out of Felissa Rose. And any film that's got 10 fake jump scares in it deserves to be taken down at least a point for that alone. But with that said, I think that should wrap things up for day 11 of the 31 days of Felissa Rose. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing if you've not done so already, which will be a great help, and I shall see you back here tomorrow with day number 12 of the 31 days of Felissa Rose, and hopefully I'll see you there.